Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the AI Pulse podcast. I'm really excited to be your host today, Max. I've got Marlena with me as well, my co-host. Today, we're going to be talking about AI governance. What is it? What do you need to know? And especially, how can we learn a lot more about this particular topic? Because it's something that is going to be going on across every single organization around the globe, really. Luckily, we've got two experts, so you don't have to listen to me talk about it. Arcangelo, Uzma, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast. Would you mind just really shortly, briefly introducing yourself to our audience?
Thank you so much for the invitation. It's really exciting to be here. My name is Arcangelo Leone de Castris. I work at the Alan Turing Institute, the National Research Center for AI and Data Science in the UK. And I work there as a research manager in AI governance and regulatory innovation, which means that I help mostly enterprises, but also public sector organizations, think about how to use AI in a way that is responsible, what safeguards, guardrails to implement to manage the risks that the use of AI systems at scale within the organization can pose.
Hi, I'm Uzma, and thanks so much for having us. It's really exciting to be here. I also work at the Alan Turing Institute on the AI Governance and Regulatory Innovation team as a research associate. That is also the team that houses the AI Standards Hub from the Turing side, and the AI Standards Hub is deliverable under the UK's National AI Strategy from 2022. And it's a partnership between the Turing, the British Standards Institution, and National Physical Laboratory. We focus a lot on technical standards as well as research on regulation and influence policy, and carry out lots of policy engagement on how we can develop responsible AI practices, which can then be implemented across various use cases.
It's so exciting for someone like me working in the AI industry for so long to have two people from the Alan Turing Institute here. Super excited about that. So for everyone listening, you have probably been in contact with an AI on a regular and daily basis, because AI is already shaping a lot of the things we see, create, and decide sometimes even. So the more and more we ask the question, okay, what does it actually take to make it trustworthy? So could you explain in simple terms, what does AI governance actually mean?
Yes, with pleasure. And I think that's the best way to start from, because AI governance is a concept that different people use in different ways to refer to slightly different things. And I'll maybe zoom out for a second and start by providing an indication of how I personally think about AI governance. I see two broad buckets or categories of things that can fall into one notion of AI governance rather than the other. And the first one is AI governance intended as rules, processes, institutions, structures that govern and control the behavior of market actors involved in the development and use of AI technologies. And the other notion of AI governance is partially similar, meaning that it also refers to processes, rules, principles, best practices, standards, guardrails, and so on, but that are designed and implemented not to govern the behavior of market actors, but to govern how AI systems behave and function within an organization. So we have, let's say, a more public policy idea of AI governance and a more organizational enterprise-focused idea of AI governance. And at the end of the day, both of them boil down to really making sure that either market actors or AI systems behave as in the best possible way as they are expected to behave. And mostly, a big focus of AI governance tend to be risk management. So it is not only about that, but I would say the primary area of practice within AI governance is risk management. That means identifying, managing, mitigating potential risks that can arise by using AI or developing it, and implementing it within an organization.
Uzma, what does it mean for you? Because I know you guys work at the same organization, but the specific specialties that you have overlap but also differ a little bit. So do you share the same vision? Do you feel there's other nuances because you have a different perspective to what AI governance is in layman's terms?
I think I largely agree with Arcangelo, but I also, just like Arcangelo, I also see it in two buckets. One is, and I think the first part is something that we've been working on for a good few years now, even before the ChatGPT boom. So back in around, I think, 2018, 2019, we started seeing this proliferation of ethics principles. So I think I'd like to start from that part, but I think one part of governance is these different frameworks, these processes, these best practices that create the roadmap for exactly what responsible AI could look like. And it's a mixture of soft and hard rules, which means you have voluntary policies or you've got hard law that regulates the AI systems. But then the other side of it is implementation. And that implementation is basically figuring out how do you navigate this web of soft and hard rules, and it could include ethics policies, it could include principle-based approaches like the OECD's AI principles, or it could include EU AI Act or AI adjacent regulations such as GDPR. How do you figure out the different tensions between these complementary but also distinct laws? And then there are voluntary commitments that you need to look at. There are risk management frameworks like Arcangelo mentioned. And there's a whole web of these available out there. And now we're reaching a stage of AI adoption, which is really happening at scale at this point. And it's about bridging that roadmap with the implementation part of it. So, and when I think about implementation, it's happening at the organizational level, let's say. How do you figure out what is the right framework to use, let's say, for product level governance, for organizational level governance, for reputational governance, and then how do you measure those societal impacts based on those frameworks? So I think for me, it's having that roadmap and then about how to implement that roadmap. That I think is what governance to me is.
You actually said something really interesting there. So ChatGPT came out around 2022, if I'm not mistaken, and this is something that is truly sometimes still a misconception within everybody's minds, is that's when AI started to exist. That's when AI started to exist in everybody's mainstream mind. But actually, AI has been around in different shapes and sizes, different kinds of technologies for so much longer. Do you feel that was also the inflection point where governance, ethics, like you mentioned, started to really go much faster and deeper on the specific topic of AI, or was that already happening before? We just didn't know about it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a fair point. I think to some degree it was already happening before. But also, it is true that investment and also the complexity of governance approaches, so investments in building up governance capacity and the complexity of governance frameworks that are being developed has increased quite substantively over the last couple of years. And I'm not sure that coincided or was triggered directly by ChatGPT becoming mainstream or making AI mainstream, as much as perhaps it could be related to the fact that AI diffusion throughout the economy is picking up, AI adoption is picking up, and this is not necessarily the type of AI that we associate with ChatGPT. It could be generative AI, but I'm talking about AI systems used to automate specific tasks, functions, operations within organizations. And those types of AI use cases are those commanding like solid governance frameworks, right? Much more than an individual using ChatGPT. And especially as of recent, with the update, with the coming into picture of agentic AI, meaning AI systems that can take action in the real world with autonomy, without supervision. Good governance has become something that it's really necessary. It cannot be renounced. Like if you want to implement AI or use AI for business, you've got to have good governance. Otherwise, at some point, things will go wrong, right? You will suffer some kind of damage from that use.
Yeah, we actually talked about AI agents with Tom Shaw in our previous episode with OpenClaw, which rise very quickly into out of obscurity into a lot of developers playing around with, a lot of people playing around with it. But then, very quickly also came a lot of because it's not governed, it's completely open source, everybody can contribute, but also everybody can actually leverage it, and people started connecting it. And there were definitely some side effects that happened with that technology. But I think that brings me to a question that you actually had about, how does this impact people's lives daily?
Yeah, I think for most of the people, AI is still a black box because we don't really know what happens inside of these AI systems, right? And that is the real danger, because we don't know how a decision, for example, how the system came to a certain decision. Or, especially thinking about the examples you just mentioned, where something is automated and the end result is, for example, a decision. You need to know how the system came to that decision in order to make, an estimate about, is this decision okay or not? Do we want to move forward with it? So even if it's sometimes a black box for, let's say regular people, if there's one thing you would advise people to pay attention to, what would there be, like with AI? Like, where should they be more critical, or where should they be more, pay attention, basically?
I think for me, so of course we work in AI governance, but we're also end users. And as an end user, I always think about automation bias, which is just that over relying on the outputs that an AI system is giving you. Just because it's a sophisticated algorithm, it's giving you a decision, you shouldn't believe it, because these systems hallucinate quite significantly. And I think also as these systems become more and more integrated into our daily lives, we're having quite intimate conversations with them, and we're trusting them with a lot of our intimate life. And I think we need to be careful about the sycophantic nature of these systems. They will affirm your opinions. They will feed into your confirmation bias, basically. And I think just remembering that this is not human, this is an AI technology just trained on really big amounts of human data, and just remembering that automation bias is a huge risk, so you don't have to believe everything that it says, and do question the outputs that it's giving you.
That's a very good statement, and I would like everyone to remember that, because as the same with, someone that sounds plausible, right? You would if it would be a human, thinking about politicians maybe always sounding very plausible, but then as human beings, we are always or should be critical, right?
Yeah.
And not believe and trust in everything we hear, even though it sounds plausible. And I think your statement made that even more clear.
I was thinking about your first comment on the black box nature of some of the most advanced models. And I just wanted to add that really they are not black boxes only for the majority of people. They probably are black boxes for all people, including the people that develop them. At least talking about the more advanced, the largest ones, right? There has been a field of research called Explainable AI, or XAI, which is not Elon Musk's company, but just a field of research that focused on making AI systems explainable through product design interventions or system design interventions. But these methodologies, one of the most famous is called mechanistic interpretability. These methodologies have sort of plateaued and stopped, at least being partially ineffective when applied on to models that are, above 1 billion parameters or so. So very large models. But very large models also get up to 200 billion parameters and so on. But yes, so at the moment that is a big problem. In terms of maybe one thing to keep in mind when interacting with an AI system, such as a chatbot, I totally agree with what Uzma said in terms of always questioning the outputs that you get, the answers that you get. But when it comes to maybe getting the feeling for the trustworthiness of a system as a layperson, as a normal end user, one litmus test that I'd like to run as a baseline is to verify, but to sort of probe the model on things that I assume you might not know or have available information about, and see whether the model answers in a way that is honest by saying, actually, I don't know, or I don't have information that is sufficiently updated. And, when you have a model that behaves like that is designed to behave like that is almost a bit of a proxy for the intellectual honesty of the company designing it. So that's one thing I would suggest, but it's just a funny little thing that I like to test models on.
So you touched on something really interesting there, because you said the kind of like a litmus test, the transparency, have they built in those, I would say, behaviors almost, that it gives you that kind of transparency where it tells you, like, I don't have the right answer, I can't answer that, or I don't have the information. If you go back just a little bit into the creation of these models, I think that's also a very important topic for a lot of AI governance, the AI Act, where that level of transparency about the model itself is becoming increasingly important. Where did the data come from that was used to train it? That's also, in my mind at least, and you got to tell me if I'm right or wrong, a part of the black box, perspective, that a lot of times there's not a lot of transparency about where exactly the data come from. What was the provenance? How are they continuously still training? Where are they getting the new data from to increase these models in sizes to get the new capabilities that they want to get to? Do you guys see it the same way, that you've got on the output side that there needs to be transparency there, but also on the input side that for organizations to truly leverage this in a way that it's going to start affecting what happens in our everyday lives, decisions being made by AI systems like you already talked about, that we want to know how it originally came to be? Almost.
I do agree that transparency is something that should happen from the get-go till the very end. And I think this is also a great example of where AI governance overlaps with existing professions of data protection or data science. And you need to think about how would your AI governance program interact with data governance programs. And I guess you have to tap into established professions in that case. And because best practices have been created in those professions when it comes to transparency, and I think a lot can be learned about that and could be transferred over to AI governance. But yeah, to my mind, transparency is something that should run throughout the AI governance chain.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't have so much to add other than I agree. And it is true that the EU AI Act is, pushing companies that develop high-risk systems to disclose information about how they train those systems, what type of data they used, and how representative the data sets are of minority categories of information, like typically less represented categories of information in data sets. I think that, if you're talking about the end users, detailed information on the training data sets might be not super easy to digest, right? To make sense of. So there is a question of how you frame transparency, how you frame the information that you're sharing based on who is the beneficiary of that information, right? And you will share a certain information in a given format if the beneficiary of that information is a third-party audit company that needs to run an audit on a system, and in a totally different way for it to be effective, right? If the beneficiary of the information is an individual that needs to decide whether what type of information you can share with the system, how the data that they provide to the system is treated and managed, and whether the system is fair based on the training data sets that has been used to develop it. So that's maybe what I'd like to stress, that really transparency is only as effective as the language that is used to convey the information relative to who is benefiting of that information, who should use that information.
I think I'd also like to just add that transparency is also quite difficult to realize when it comes to these large data sets, especially for, large language models of, all of generative AI really, because you're trying to get data from the entire internet and then trying to figure out provenance of that data is, it's almost an impossible task. And you will be looking at lots of different thorny issues within that. Have you used personal data? How do you figure that out? Have you used data that's protected by copyright? How do you figure that out? How do you trace provenance in that case? So I think just figuring out then how do you make all of this transparent is becoming an increasingly impossible task. But yeah, I won't say impossible, like I said, it has to be done.
Yeah.
It is required for good governance and we have to try, but yeah, it's these data sets are extremely large.
Talking about all these training data and the challenge to really, get to the root of the information, basically. So, because we all already know by using it on an almost regular basis, it can feel like a superpower to use AI. But then you can go from idea to output, super fast. It can help you. But then the question, and I think you already raised it, where does the originality come from, right? So what does it mean to own something if you created it with AI?
That's a really good question. And I think it's something that is quite unresolved right now. And it's a question that we explored just briefly in a recent report that we did at the Turing called Creative Gray Zones. And so under UK law, under Copyright Designs and Patents Act, computer-generated works have been recognized as being copyrightable, and they're defined as works that are done by a computer and that require no human author, basically. But in order to, you need a human author for copyrightability in the UK under UK law. So the person who has carried out the necessary arrangements for that work would be considered the proper human author in that case. But when it comes to AI, that's quite difficult to figure out, because is it the developer who's going to be, who's done the necessary arrangements for creating that work? Is it the AI system itself or the model? Is it the person who gave the prompt, or is it the person who is the rights holder? So I think that it's a very complex area right now, and we're still trying to resolve this question.
I love having that conversation, because it's, if you think about it, at least, and this is completely just my view, where if you compare it to tools, right? So the AI is a tool to express your creativity in this particular instance, to create something creative, just like a painter uses paint. Is the person that created that paint, that created that product, that base product, to then create something creative, also part of the whole copyright chain? Because you could make that comparison. But I think with AI, because I wonder if people view it as something that's now easier to do, because I can't paint, but I can create something creative with AI, right? I wonder if people, for that reason, view it as something that should not be as easily considered as something you can copyright, because it feels easier to do. But actually, if you want to be successful with it, speaking from my own frustration, not experience, but pure frustration, and trying to get it right, it takes time. It takes a learning curve as well to be able to work effectively with this new tool that we now have. Would you draw that parallel as well, or are you like, no, this is entirely different kind of story?
So let me see if I understood the question correctly. So are you saying, because I think I heard two different parts to it. That's
entirely possible.
So I think one part is whether these AI systems, because they've learned from human data, there's inspiration seeking, a lot like the way human beings learn from, they've read a book, they've seen other sorts of artistic works, and they're inspired by that, and they want to create something similar but not same.
Yeah. Is it then a derivative, or is it actually something new original, right? You could have that kind of, path as well.
Yes. So I think this is a big debate, and
know, right?
and
that's why I started off with, I love this conversation, because it can be a really big debate.
Yes. So a lot of people say that AI is doing what humans do. It's learning the way humans do. And in a way, yes, that is true, because that is exactly what, it's the human brain that it is modeled off of. So I think there is that inspiration seeking, but it's happening at an industrial scale and it's happening for commercial purposes, which sort of defeats the purpose for, let's say, a creator who's probably not doing it always for a commercial purpose. They like being an artist and that's their medium of expression. And then they think that, okay, let's commercialize it as well. So I think the difference is one of scale and the fact that it's commercialized also at scale. The second question that I heard was whether the amount of human labor goes into embracing an AI tool is similar to learning
A skill,
yeah,
basically.
good question. And I don't think I've thought about that before. But I guess I don't know if it takes just as much time. I do think it's a skill that needs to be learned because AI tools are quite technical and they are going to change the way we work in the future. Well, they're already transforming the way we work. But such a difficult and interesting question. I think this brings me back to this finding that we had in the Creative Gray Zones report of how there's this category of traditional technologists and then there's this category of traditional creatives. But now there's something happening in between where both sides are taking inspiration from each other and they are using AI tools to create creative works. And creativity is also, changing. So yeah, it's a question that I'd like to think about more as well.
I think the conclusion is the parameters of what is what are changing basically as we go along.
Arcangelo, what do you think?
I'll pick both topics that we mentioned one by one. On the first one, whether AI systems can be tools for creativity, I think absolutely they can be incredible tools to amplify human creativity. At the same time, it is really, I think, important for humans that use AI systems creatively to not get too lazy, let's say. So Uzma before was talking about automation bias. If we apply that to a creative process, that means that essentially we are almost giving up the process for the outcome, for a very easy outcome, which could be the most beautiful picture or painting ever. But if you lose the ability to struggle through all the challenges and obstacles and mistakes that you do to develop that beautiful paintings yourself with your hands, to just jump to the conclusion, you're essentially stealing yourself out of your own creativity, and at the end of the day, and you will lose the ability to do that in the long term if you were able to do it in the first place. On whether AI systems can produce something new and creative and whether the output of an AI system can be subject to ownership as a standalone thing. Moving away from legal frameworks and copyright, I think that I struggled to see the output of an AI system as something creative. Of course, humans create things by being exposed to the creations of other humans before them, right? So in that sense, we are similar to AI systems. If AI system average on their training data to produce an output, we go through a similar process. However, I think that I'm thinking two things at the moment. The first one is we have plenty of examples of artists that generated work that was unprecedented or that they had never been exposed to. I'm thinking, for example, about a writer that I really like, Clarice Lispector, Brazilian writer. She had never read a novel before writing her first novel. Just a curiosity, an example of what I mean by saying that, yeah, sometimes human can generate something out of unexpected training, right? Or training data. The second thing that I wanted to stress is that creativity in humans is also boils down to intentional choices that are taken and made through the process of creation. So that intention of conveying a certain meaning through your art, of challenging a certain worldview, proposing a critique, a cultural, social critique, that is visible in the final creative product, is the result of small intentional choices taken along the way. And this intention is not something that an AI system has, right? For me, that is artistic creativity, that is art, is that kind of translation of intention through craft into something striking. But without intention, there is no art. That was my slightly hot take.
That's a very strong and good statement.
Definitely.
Yeah. Would you say then, maybe to wrap it up, that, I mean, what I think was very beautiful that you said is like we would steal ourselves the creativity if we give it away to AI, basically. So that's, I think, what nobody wants. But on the other side, those intentional decisions we make in a creative process, is AI governance maybe also trying to bring the intention into the system? Is this something we could say? I mean, not that we want to make it, yeah, or is this something we want to try with AI governance?
So I think I would love to see how we try this with AI governance. And some of the points that Arcangelo brought up right now are really powerful and very strong. And something that it's a risk that emerges from that is something we discussed in the Creative Gray Zones report as well. And right now we've placed it in the category of ethical gray zones. And I think currently it's an ethical issue where using AI systems and delegating creativity to AI systems could actually lead to cultural entropy in a way that we have a world where there's a decline in motivation to be creative on the human level because AI systems are trying to replace that. And secondly, when there's a decline in human creativity, there's less human data for AI to be trained on. And there would be synthetic data that AI would be trained on then. So a lot of AI systems would now be trained on synthetic data, and there would be homogeneous results, and it would be less diverse, less innovative, because like Arcangelo said, it's difficult to see that an AI system would come up with something truly new and truly creative. So I think that's a huge risk, and I think I would place it in the ethical category right now. And I would love to see it get transferred over to the governance landscape, because I wouldn't want to see a decline in culture and tradition, and I don't want to see that decline. That needs to go on.
Arcangelo, when you were talking about AI and creativity, you said something that kind of caught my attention a little bit, where you pointed out that to you feel it's hard to accept that you can truly see AI as creative. And I want to make a reference to a specific Star Trek episode where Data, basically an animatronic, a robot, extremely advanced, but in essence, even though they had a positronic brain is what they call it, but in essence, it's an extremely evolved version of the type of artificial intelligence that we see today, where he went through the process of mastering classical music by listening to it, playing it himself, and eventually he started to create his own compositions of classical music. And I remember in that episode, they went through the whole kind of ethical process as well of like, is this actually new creation? Is this something that is truly creative? How would you kind of like blend that with your statement, like, I have a hard time believing AI can truly be creative, where if you think about it that way, and maybe it's because it's a humanized form of AI, that I was like, yeah, that is pure new creativity.
I think you just gave my answer in your very last sentence.
Okay.
But I think it makes perfect sense that happened in that episode, and also the justification they gave, the conclusion they reached, that is new creation, makes perfect sense. But that's because Data in the series is humanized. You said humanized, right? He's anthropomorphized.
Yeah.
That is what happens when you forget that how AI systems are developed, how they work, why they produce certain outputs, and you start looking at them as alien intelligence.
Awesome. Well, on that AI bubble that just burst for me. Thank you guys for being on the episode. It was truly insightful. I'm going to go watch that episode again of Star Trek just because I made one feel better. Marlene, thank you as well for co-hosting this with me. But guys, thank you so much. This was extremely insightful.
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having us. It was a really great conversation.
It was a pleasure. Thank you so much.